Hello everyone. So we went over some pretty basic inheritance examples and how we can use the super constructor and how we can use other ideas to create more advanced classes. And what we want to look at now is this concepts of inheritance with visibility modifiers and this important modifier that's called protected. So to do this, when you download your Java files, you'll see that there's a package called account and another package called week6. And inside of the account package is where a lot of this pre-made code will already be made for you. But I want to go ahead and show off what's actually going on in each of these. I have a practice driver built myself inside of one of these accounts as well. You'll see that there's also another one called account driver in week6. But if you take a look at the account.java file, you'll notice that we have this keyword called protected. Now, protected essentially is a keyword that goes ahead and says, okay, the only things that can access the variables that are protected here are what's inside of this account package. So now if I go ahead and I change these to private, you'll notice that my checkings account and my savings account get these issues that are shown as a red in my code. Now, if I go ahead and try to highlight these, what will happen is that I will need to change the visibility of my code because private essentially means that only this class can see them. So if I go ahead and maybe I'll say, okay, I'm going to make them public. What's an issue with making these public? Well, if I go ahead and I go into my account driver that is inside of a different package called week6 and I make a new account called first, if I type in first dot, you'll notice that I have access to account number, balance, and name. So I have access to these variables, name, account number, and balance, that maybe I don't want users to have access to outside of this package. Now, if I go ahead and I try to type out account name like so, you'll see here, account number, excuse me, not name. You'll see here that I'm able to access it pretty well. Let me do a system.out.println first.account num, like so. And let me close this one off. And again, maybe you don't want someone to be able to access this number. So if I type this out, you'll see here when I run my driver that I do have 159650. And let's just say that you're working in an environment where you don't want this to be an issue, or excuse me, you don't want the user to be able to do this. What you can then do is essentially change this over to the keyword called protected. So if I change these two to the protected, you'll notice that I now have access in checkings account and savings account. I don't get the errors that I used to get, but in account driver, what do I get the error as? The account num is not visible. So I can either change this to public or not. So again, the three different variables that we are working with here between protected, private, and public is essentially public is a variable that can be accessible by anything in your code anywhere. Private can only be accessible by the immediate class that is declared in, and protected can only be accessed by classes that are in the same package as that variable. So that's kind of the difference between your visibility modifiers and how they're going to be working. And you'll notice here, if we take a look at the constructors as well, there's a little bit of an issue here. You'll see here that in your lectures that we need an empty default constructor in the account class. And then we can go ahead and try to delete this constructor. So let's go ahead and just delete this guy here. I'm going to save it in my code. And you'll see here that when I delete this constructor, let me go ahead and delete my, or I'll leave this one here. I do get an error in my account driver here. Oops, go ahead and try to run it. We'll see here that I get this error at checkings account. And what happens here is that implicit superconstructor account is undefined. Must explicitly invoke another constructor. So what's happening here is you'll see that in my checkings account, I have my name is equal to iname, account number is equal to number, balance is equal to amount. And you'll notice here, you might be saying, okay, well, where is name, account name, number, and balance coming from? I'm not declaring them in my checking account. Where am I declaring them in? Oh, I'm declaring them in my protected account over here. But you'll notice that I get this error because it's saying that, well, because you didn't say anything in specific, what we're trying to call is the default constructor, which isn't here right now, so I'm getting an error. So how would you fix this? Well, what we could do essentially is after you go ahead and instead of sending these guys to name is equal to iname, account num is equal to number, what you can say instead is this word called super, which we saw in our previous lecture. I'm going to say super in name, number, and amount, like so. And now you'll see if I try running my constructor now, it works just fine, because what's happening is I'm forcing my code to go ahead and call this one that's right here, my super constructor. But again, is that the best route? No, maybe you want your code to actually say it this way. So how do I solve this issue where it's giving me the thing that's saying, okay, well, we expect it to have that constructor. It's an explicit declaration of this constructor. How do I fix it? Well, what you would need then is a default constructor. So essentially, in your Java code, if you don't explicitly state to use a super constructor, it is going to default to your blank constructor like so. And this constructor essentially will go ahead and make a default checking account and then set the values here. These values will be set to itself. And the reason that it works is because once this constructor is called, these variables are created, and now we can fill them in with our code right here. So again, you'll see here that either way works. We can use this super constructor as well. Whichever way that you want to do it is fine. Just be aware of that reason that we're using that constructor there. So again, once we create an object from a derived class, the class's constructor is called. However, if we don't explicitly call a base class constructor within it, either using super or referencing the parameter list, the base class default constructor is called first. And this is going to guarantee that these variables are created for us. That's the reason that that happens. Great. And so again, if you want to go ahead, if you want to use the other parameterized constructor, instead of using super, of course, in our savings account, we can use super right here. And since we're passing in these three parameters, it is going to be calling this constructor that's right here. So again, that's kind of the difference between the constructors and the visibility. Please experiment a bit around with the packages, the visibility, and why we're using the protected modifier. It's a little confusing at the start, but once you guys start seeing these errors and how to solve them, it gets a bit more clear. And again, protected is for your packages, public is for everyone, and private is for the class.